not even mean, Bowers Game Corner.
Here, YouTube, I'm back again to read some more rules, and today we're reading the rules for Monopoly. So, rules for play. Object. The object of the game is to become the wealthiest player through buying, renting, and selling property. Equipment. The equipment consists of a board, 2 dice, tokens, 32 houses and 12 hotels. There are chance and community chest cards, a title deed card for each property, and play money. Preparation. Place the board on a table and put the chance and community chest cards face down on their allotted spaces on the board. Each player chooses 1 token to represent him on his travels around the board. Each player is given $1,500, divided as follows. 2 each of the $500 bills, $100 bills, and $50 bills, 6 each of the $20 bills, and then 5 each of the $10 bills, $5 bills, and $1 bills. All remaining money and other equipment go to the bank. Banker. Select as banker a player who will also make a good auctioneer. If the banker plays in the game, he must keep his personal funds separate from those of the bank. When more than 5 persons play, the banker may elect to act only as banker and auctioneer. The bank. Besides the bank's money, the bank holds the title deed cards and houses and hotels prior to purchase and use by the players. The bank pays salaries and bonuses. It sells and auctions properties and hands out the proper title deed cards. It sells houses and hotels to the players and loans money when required on mortgages. The bank collects all taxes, fines, loans, and interest, and the price of all properties which it sells and auctions. The bank never goes broke. If the bank runs out of money, it may issue as much more as may be needed by merely writing on any ordinary paper. The play. Starting with the banker, each player in turn throws the dice. The player with the highest total starts the play. He places his token on the corner marked Go, throws the 2 dice, and moves his token in the direction of the arrow, the number of spaces indicated by the dice. After he has completed his play, the turn to play passes to the left. The tokens remain on the spaces occupied and proceed from that point on the player's next turn. 2 or more tokens may rest on the same space at the same time. According to the space which his token reaches, a player may be entitled to buy real estate or other properties, or be obliged to pay rent, pay taxes, draw a chance or community chest card, go to jail, etc. If a player throws doubles, he moves his token, as usual, the sum of the 2 dice, and is subject to any privileges or penalties pertaining to the space on which he lands. Retaining the dice, he throws again and moves his token as before. If a player throws doubles 3 times in succession, he moves his token immediately to the space marked In Jail. See Jail. Go. Each time a player's token lands on or passes over Go, whether by a throw of the dice or by drawing a card, the banker pays him $200 salary. However, $200 is paid only once each time around the board. If a player passing Go on the throw of the dice lands 2 spaces beyond it on Community Chest or 7 spaces beyond it on Chance and draws the card Advance to Go, he collects $200 for passing Go the first time and another $200 for reaching it the second time by instructions on the card. Buying property. Whenever a player lands on an unowned property, he may buy that property from the bank at its listed price. He receives the title deed card showing ownership and places it face up in front of him. If he does not wish to buy the property, it is sold at auction by the banker to the highest bidder. The buyer pays to the bank the amount of the bid in cash and receives the title deed card for that property. Any player, including the one who declined the option of buying it at the printed price, may bid. Bidding may start at any price. Paying rent. When a player lands on property owned by another player, the owner collects rent from him in accordance with the listed price on the title deed card applying to it. If the property is mortgaged, no rent can be collected. When a property is mortgaged, its title deed card is placed face down in front of the owner. It is an advantage to hold all the title deeds in a color group, i.e. Boardwalk and Park Place, or Connecticut, Vermont, and Oriental Avenues, because the owner may then charge double rent for unimproved properties in that color group. This rule applies to unmortgaged properties even if another property in that color group is mortgaged. It is even more of an advantage to have houses or hotels on properties because rents are much higher than for unimproved properties. The owner may not collect his rent if he fails to ask for it before the second player following throws the dice. Chance and Community Chest. When a player lands on either of these spaces, he takes the top card from the deck indicated, follows the instructions, and returns the card face down to the bottom of the deck. The Get Out of Jail Free card is held until used and then returned to the bottom of the deck. If the player who draws it does not wish to use it, he may sell it at any time to another player at a price agreeable to both. Income tax. When a player lands on income tax, he has 2 options. He may estimate his tax at $200 and pay the bank, or he may pay 10% of his total worth to the bank. his total worth is all his cash on hand, printed prices of mortgaged and unmortgaged properties, and cost price of all buildings he owns. The player must decide which option he will take before he adds up his total worth. Jail. A player lands in jail when 1. His token lands on the space marked Go to Jail, 2. He draws a card marked Go to Jail, or 3. He throws doubles 3 times in succession. When a player is sent to jail, he cannot collect $200 salary in that move, since regardless of where his token is on the board, he must move it directly into jail. A player's turn ends when it is sent to jail. If a player is not sent to jail, but in the ordinary course of play lands on that space, he is just visiting, incurs no penalty, and moves ahead in the usual manner on his next turn. A player gets out of jail by 1. Throwing doubles on any of his next 3 turns. If he succeeds in doing this, he immediately moves forward the number of spaces shown by his double throw. Even though he has thrown doubles, he does not take another turn. 2. Using the Get Out of Jail Free card if he has it. 3. Purchasing the Get Out of Jail Free card from another player and playing it. Or 4. Paying a fine of $50 before he rolls the dice on either of his next 2 turns. If the player does not throw doubles by his 3rd turn, he must pay the $50 fine. He then gets out of jail and immediately moves forward the number of spaces shown by his throw. Even though he is in jail, a player may buy or sell property, buy or sell houses and hotels, and collect rents. Free parking. A player landing on this space does not receive any money, property, or reward of any kind. This is just a free resting space. Houses. When a player owns all the properties in a color group, he may buy houses from that bank and erect them on those properties. If he buys one house, he may put it on any one of those properties. The next house he buys must be erected on one of the unimproved properties of this or any other complete color groups he may own. The price he must pay the bank for each house is shown on his title deed card for the property on which he erects the house. The owner can still collect double rent from an opponent who lands on the unimproved properties of his complete color group. Following the above rules, a player may buy and erect at any time as many houses as his judgment and financial standing will allow, but he must build evenly, i.e., he cannot erect more than one house on any one property of any color group until he has built one house on every property of that group. He may then begin on the second row of houses and so on up to a limit of 4 houses to a property. For example, he cannot build 3 houses on one property if he only has 1 house on another property of that group. As a player builds evenly, he must also break down evenly if he sells houses back to the bank. See selling property. Hotels. When a player has 4 houses on each property of a complete color group, he may buy a hotel from the bank and erect it on any property of that color group. He returns the 4 houses from that property to the bank and pays the price for the hotel as shown on the title deed card. Only one hotel may be erected on any one property. Building shortage. When the bank has no houses to sell, players wishing to build must wait for some player to turn back or to sell his houses to the bank before building. If there are a limited number of houses and hotels available and 2 or more players wish to buy more than the bank has, the houses or hotels must be sold at auction to the highest bidder. Selling property. Unimproved properties, railroads, and utilities, but not buildings, may be sold to any player as a private transaction for any amount that the owner can get. However, no property can be sold to another player if buildings are standing on any properties of that color group. Any buildings so located must be sold back to the bank before the owner can sell any property of that color group. Houses and hotels may be sold back to the bank at any time for 1/2 the price paid for them. All houses on one color group must be sold one by one evenly in reverse of the manner in which they were erected. All hotels on one color group may be sold at once, or they may be sold one house at a time. 1 hotel equals 5 houses, evenly in reverse of the manner in which they were erected. Mortgages. Unimproved properties can be mortgaged through the bank at any time. Before an improved property can be mortgaged, all the buildings on all the properties of its color group must be sold back to the bank at half price. The mortgage value is printed on each title deed card. No rent can be collected on mortgaged properties or utilities, but rent can be collected on unmortgaged properties in the same group. In order to lift the mortgage, the owner must pay the bank the amount of the mortgage plus 10% interest. When all the properties of a color group are no longer mortgaged, the owner may begin to buy back houses at full price. The player who mortgages property retains possession of it, and no other player may secure it by lifting the mortgage from the bank. However, the owner may sell this mortgaged property to another player at any agreed price. The new owner may lift the mortgage at once if he wishes by paying off the mortgage plus 10% interest to the bank. If he does not lift the mortgage at once, he must pay the bank 10% interest when he buys the property, and if he lifts the mortgage later, he must pay an additional 10% interest as well as the amount of the mortgage to the bank. Bankruptcy. A player is bankrupt when he owes more than he can pay either to another player or to the bank. If his debt is to another player, he must turn over to that player all that he has of value and retire from the game. In making this settlement, if he owns houses or hotels, he must return these to the bank in exchange for money to the extent of 1/2 the amount paid for them, and this cash is given to the creditor. If he has mortgage property, he also turns this property over to his creditor, but the new owner must at once pay the bank the amount of interest on the loan, which is 10% of the value of the property. After the new owner does this, he may, at his option, pay the principal or hold the property until some later turn, at which time he may lift the mortgage. If he holds property in this way until a later turn, he must pay the interest again when he lifts the mortgage. Should a player owe the bank instead of another player more than he can pay, because of taxes or penalties, even by selling his building and mortgaging property, he must turn over all his assets to the bank. In this case, the bank immediately sells by auction all property so taken except buildings. A bankrupt player must immediately retire from the game. The last player left in the game wins. Miscellaneous. Money can only be loaned to a player by the bank and then only by mortgaging property. No player may borrow from or lend money to another player. Rules for short games. There are 3 differences in rules for this short game. First, during preparation for play, the banker shuffles the pack of title deed cards. The pack is then cut by the player at his left, and the banker deals one at a time 2 title deed cards to each player, including himself if he both plays and acts as a banker. Players receiving title deed cards must immediately pay the bank the printed price of each of the 2 properties thus acquired. The play then commences as in the regular game. Next, in this short game, it is only necessary to have 3 houses instead of 4 on each of a complete color group before the player may buy a hotel. Rent received for a hotel remains the same as in the regular game. The turn-in value of a hotel is still 1/2 the purchase price, which in this game is 1 house less than in the regular game. End of game. The first player to go bankrupt retires from the game as in the regular game. However, when the second bankruptcy occurs, the game ends. Play immediately ceases when the bankrupt player turns over to his creditor all that he has of value, including buildings and any other properties, whether the creditor happens to be a rival player or the bank. Each remaining player then values his property, including cash on hands, lots, utilities, and railroads owned by him at the price printed on the board, any mortgage property owned by him at 1/2 price printed on the board, houses valued at purchase price, and hotels valued at the purchase price, including the value of the 3 houses turned in. Richest player wins. Time limit game. Before starting, agree upon a definite hour of termination. Richest player then winning. Before starting the game, title deed cards are shuffled and cut, and banker deals 2 title deed cards to each player. Players immediately pay the bank the price of property dealt to them. Questions that people ask about Monopoly rules. Must I go around the board once before purchasing property? No, you may begin purchasing property with the first available space you land on. May I collect rent while in jail? Yes, you may collect rent and conduct business as usual while in jail. Do I get any money for landing on free parking? No. If you land on free parking, you receive no money, property, or reward of any kind. If I own all the properties of one color group, may I put 3 houses on only one property? No. Remember to build evenly at all times. You may not put more than 1 house on any property of a color group until each property of that group has at least 1 house on it. Must I wait until my turn to buy houses and hotels? No, you may transact business such as buying and selling houses anytime on your turn or between moves by other players. May I mortgage a property to buy other properties, houses, or hotels? Yes, you may mortgage property to buy houses, hotels, or other properties of any color group. Common points relating to mortgage. You need not own all properties of a color group in order to mortgage one of those properties. Property may not be mortgaged, however, if there are buildings on that color group. In this case, all the buildings must be sold back to the bank at half price before you can mortgage the property in question. Even after 1 or more properties of a complete color group have been mortgaged, you may still collect double the rent on the unmortgaged properties of that group. If you own all 4 railroads and mortgage 1 or more of them, you may still collect $200 rent when an opponent lands on an unmortgaged railroad. Don't forget, whenever a card directs you to advance to any space, move forward, not backward. When assessed for street repairs, pay for all houses and hotels you own on the entire board at the time. If you pass go after drawing a chance or community chest card directing you to move to another property, you collect $200 unless otherwise indicated on the card. When you pass go, land on community chest or chance, and are then sent to jail, you still may collect $200 because you passed go before you were sent to jail. The income tax is 10% of your total assets, cash on hand, property, houses, and hotels. Are deals allowed between players? Yes, unimproved properties, railroads, and utilities, but not buildings, may be sold to any player as a private transaction for any amount that the owner can get. May I borrow money from another player? No. You may borrow money only from the bank. Why does my set only have 32 houses? To maintain a balance in the game, there have always been exactly 32 houses and 12 hotels in the game of Monopoly. If it were possible to improve all properties, it would be difficult to force opponents into bankruptcy. What happens in the event of a building shortage? In the event of a building shortage where 2 or more players are waiting to buy houses and hotels, the bank may auction the building to the highest player as they become available. May I make my own rules? Some people play Monopoly according to what are called house rules. A common example is placing luxury tax money on free parking. The official Parker Brothers rules, which are followed in tournament play, do not allow such variations. What if the bank runs out of money? Some players think the bank is bankrupt if it runs out of money. The bank never goes bankrupt. To continue playing, use slips of paper to keep track of each player's banking transaction until the bank has enough paper money to operate again. And those are the rules for Monopoly. If this helped you out, please consider giving it a thumbs up. Also consider subscribing or supporting the Patreon. But go have some fun, and thanks for your time. This video is brought to you by all of my amazing Patreon supporters, and I would love it if you would join their ranks and have your name immortalized in the end of many of my videos for the end of time. But consider for only $1 a month, and as always, thanks for stopping by.